Hi, and welcome to the tnkgrl Mobile Podcast. I'm Miriam, and I am joined today by the wonderful, the one and only Michael Fisher of Pocket Now. Hi, Michael. How are you doing?
Miriam, I'm fantastic. I'm so pleased. This is my first time on your show, and I've been listening to it for so long it doesn't even seem real. So thank you for having me. I'm wonderful. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us. It is today, Sunday, November 30th, and I've been slacking off. The last podcast I did was in September sometime.
Wow.
Life has been a little crazy. So normally I try to do this every month, but every now and then I skip a month. And it happened in August with Burning Man, and it happened again in October. As you know, I'm no longer at Pebble, so that's kind of been a big change. I've had to, do some freelance stuff and other things. So if you guys know of anyone who's looking for somebody to work for them full time, let me know. I'm looking for something either in the media, like I was doing before at Engadget, or something in PR, like I did for Pebble, or maybe something more adventurous and fun in maybe the VC crowdfunding space. That's an area where I've been doing some freelance work and really enjoying myself. So I'm just putting it out there, so get it out of the way.
Can I put something out there on the tail of that?
Yeah.
Because I know people will ask it because it's common knowledge that we just lost a treasured team member at Pocket Now. Taylor Martin decided to go to a different corner of the internet to do his thing. So people will ask. It was like, well, you guys should hire Miriam. People have already asked, and I wanted to say that that would be so awesome. Unfortunately, due to a bunch of stuff beyond my control, that discussion is not even being had until January. So I'm sure someone will scoop you up before then. But.
Well, you never know. Yes, Michael is right. We've discussed it. I should also take this opportunity to announce that I am partnering with Mobile Nations, the team of Android Central. I'm more connectedly Windows Phone Central for CES. So I will be joining them and helping them out, which I think is really, really exciting. And I just put that out there. I mean, I could. What's that?
I'm sorry. Do they have a sponsored booth this year, like they did last year? Do you know?
I'm not exactly sure what the setup is. I do believe they have something because they're going to be doing a lot of live shows like they did last year. So
cool.
Should be fun. I had the option to potentially get sponsored and do that CS for myself for my blog, but it's always more fun in a team.
Yes, it is.
And that's kind of like why I think this was going to be a good arrangement. So. That's some big news. What else is happening? As you know, because I didn't podcast last month, the big news the big news on my last podcast is when I had Brad here again, and we talked about iPhones and all the new iOS and iPhone stuff. And so the big news, I think, in the last 2 months, really, let's face it, has been Lollipop and the Nexus devices, right?
That's right, and I want you to know that I resisted the urge to break out into that horrible song from the '60s just then, the Lollipop song.
Well, you're welcome to, because this is why I like my podcast to be as wacky as possible. But you know what? Let's talk about Lollipop and the Nexus devices, and I also want to let my listeners know that as they probably saw, I started posting some YouTube videos, and I've got a few of them queued up for the next few days, and I have 9 devices right here on my desk that have arrived in the last month because I'm a little delayed from everyone else with this stuff, and I'll just briefly mention them and let you know that they're going to be reviewed before the end of, before CES is what I'm promising, because you never know, holidays can get crazy.
It's a good 4-week window you're leaving yourself there, 4 or 5 weeks.
I think it's plenty of time, There's actually really 8 devices. One of them is not really that appealing. But so tell me, Michael, I know you have a Nexus 6.
I do.
What is your daily driver right now? Like, what is the thing that gets you excited every day when you work?
So as my Twitter handle implies, I carry 2 phones, and I've carried 2 phones for like 7 or 8 years since before I got into this whole crazy world. And those, for the past 2 generations of Moto X, one of those slots has been filled by the Moto X. So this is the Moto X 2014 that I'm carrying right now with the custom leather back and my Twitter handle on the side. And, oh my God.
This is mine right there, but mine is the PVC one, cheapest.
Oh, it's the polycarbonate.
It's not. It's plastic. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Okay. All right, yeah. See, I was thinking about getting one of those, but I just, the blue leather called to me, and I adore the Moto X, and I look forward to going back to it after the monstrosity that is the Nexus 6, which is
So it's
just
funny you mentioned
massive.
that because the
Yeah,
Moto X I just showed you is my review unit. It's an AT&T device from Motorola. I did not buy it. I do not intend on making the Moto X my primary phone, even though I have to say it's up there for me. Well, we should talk about that. We should pick
yeah,
our favorite phones because everybody's got a different take on that. I am still, because I don't have an Nexus 6 review unit. Let's put things very in perspective. I no longer have enough clout apparently to get myself iPhone review units. So I still haven't reviewed one. I've played with them, obviously. A lot of my friends have it, and I've played with it. I would love to get a 6 Plus myself because of the
yeah,
OIS, as you know.
yeah.
Um, and then for Nexus, I did get a Nexus 9 review unit under embargo from our friends at HTC, which I reviewed on my
Best of
blog.
that. Yeah.
But I did not get a Nexus 6. Apparently, they're in very, very short supply. The Google folks have been super friendly every time I bug them about it and saying, Miriam, we love you dearly, and as soon as we have one, it will send it your way. But
Yeah.
the Moto folks don't even have them. So guess what I'm rocking still every day?
What
Good
is
old
that?
Nexus
Oh, the Nexus 5, the
5.
Soft Touch Black Edition, yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Here.
as it's come to be known in this office, the Nexus 9 Mini.
There you go, Nexus 9 Mini. Like now you can see it. I love this phone. It's amazing how this is probably one of those Nexuses that this is the first year that even though I've actually played extensively the Nexus 6, I went to Engadget Expand to
In New
hang out
York?
with to hang out with the in New York, yeah, to hang out with the Engadget crew last month, and I played with Brad's Nexus 6 quite a bit. Brad and I kind of like best buddies, so like we'll
Brad's
trade
great.
phones for a day at a time often. Let me play with it quite a bit, and I have to say it's awesome, but it's so freaking big.
It's mammoth.
I don't know, now that I have Lollipop on the Nexus 5, other than battery life, which I think it's a combination of Lollipop and actually the fact that I always have a wearable paired to my phone, so a lot of Bluetooth activity,
Right.
and the fact that honestly I think my Nexus 5 is dying. Like it's had a good life, but the battery I don't think is as good as it used to be in terms of purely the physical chemistry. It's been charged so much.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, though, because despite its monstrous battery, I have not had the best of luck with the battery life on my Nexus 6.
Huh.
And that's despite the Project Volta stuff that's built into Lollipops, despite this huge power pack. Like, I think the most I've been able to get out of it in terms of screen on time is about 5.5 hours over the course of a day and a half. And, that's not bad by any stretch of the
Not bad,
imagination.
but
But
for
for a
something that
phone
big.
this big, right? And immediately my mind goes to, okay, well, it's a super high res panel as well, the AMOLED, and maybe it's not fully optimized, but generally manufacturers have solved this thing. They've sort of subverted that trope of like, oh, super high res display equals massive battery drain. That's not always the case, as long as they're built right. So I don't really know where to pin the blame for this kind of
I
crappy
can't
battery
help
life.
but think that Motorola kind of screwed up again this year. I hate to be hard on them because I love them dearly. Last year they really did screw up with the Moto X. It
In
never was
terms
on
of
my radar. I mean, it was a great phone, felt good, but I didn't think it just the specs just didn't do it for me, and the performance wasn't there. And this year they remedied that, but then they didn't put OIS on the camera. And then they gave us the Droid Turbo, which has
right.
a much better panel and has the perfect size and perfect battery life, but also doesn't have OIS. And then they give us a gigantic monster called the Nexus 6 that does have OIS. Like,
It's got
to me,
OEM.
that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it was an interesting kind of I don't know, it was a fragmented delivery of the various iterations on the same device. But I will say about the Turbo, I wasn't as blown away by it as I expected to be based on the specs, and I think Motorola excels at delivering a good experience without focusing on the specs. And I think that's why I liked last year's Moto X actually. This year's Moto X I think compromises a few of those initial ideals.
The size is a little big,
Specs.
huh?
It's a little wide, it's a little
Yeah.
more ungainly. The overstated dimple on the back is just kind of hilarious to me.
But I love the metal finish. Like if last
Oh
year it
yeah,
had stayed the same size and grown with less bezel, like stayed the same size, 5 inch instead of 4 point. It was 4.7, right?
It was 4.7.
Five
Yeah,
is 5 inch with just 1080p OIS on the camera, not more pixels, just OIS. and that metal build, I would have been on board for that being my Nexus. Because to me, honestly, I cannot do a phone without OIS anymore. I refuse. It's not happening. Like, I am putting my foot down. Manufacturers, if you want to sell me a phone, it has to have OIS.
I'm with you on that, and I'm glad to see that it's still being built in, because we saw an initial spike of it. We saw the HTC One M7, we saw the various Lumias with it, and then we saw the HTC One M8 come out and they sacrificed OIS for that duo camera arrangement, which I don't think was a terribly great thing. But I'm glad to see that that it has not been abandoned. Is Sony doing it on their latest stuff?
It's surprising to me they're not, considering they are probably the ones that are the most likely, other than Microsoft Nokia, ex-Nokia, now Microsoft, to really have that level of expertise. I am stunned, in fact, that the Z3 Compact and the Z3, which I'm still waiting to get review units of, by the way. I really want I particularly want the Z3 Compact, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Tony reviewed that for us.
I want them to put, I think they're going to have to put OIS in the Z4. It makes sense. They make half the sensors with OIS out there.
But can I ask you, I mean, you being a camera aficionado and way more qualified than I am to talk about optics and stuff, aren't you impressed, as I am, by Sony's digital stabilization? Because I've always sort of poo-pooed digital stabilization, but Sony does such a great job of it that maybe OIS isn't necessary on their phones?
It is good, and it's good on iPhones that don't have OIS, so it can be done right. I think Samsung's done a pretty good job with it as well. Like on the non-Note 4, which is the only device I have other than the Galaxy's K-Zoom that has OIS. Right. I think it's possible, but honestly, it's you're losing pixels, and I would rather. I think where OIS really becomes interesting is in video, and if you compare iPhone 6 Plus versus iPhone 6 footage, even though there's clever, stabilization going on in software, it's night and day. And if you take any of the Lumias and you try walking with them and shooting at the same time, it's flawless, right? I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, I remember wondering if I had a busted 1020 though, because of my OIS wasn't as good, and then I kind of learned what to look for and stuff. But comparing the iPhones, I remember doing that, and not that this is an OIS thing, but also HDR. It's interesting to see how other manufacturers and Android have sort of caught up with and surpassed Apple in terms of HDR implementation, because it's almost like it doesn't do anything on the iPhone, and then you fire up HDR in a Samsung or an HTC, not an HTC, that's a bad example, but a Motorola, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, this is really bringing a lot of the light out of those shadows. That's cool.
What I love about Samsung is that they're now doing live preview HDR. So what you see on the viewfinder is actually HDR in real time, which is really cool.
Oh.
Try it sometime. They do this on the GS5, the Alpha, and Samsung, the Note 4, and the Edge.
Yes, yeah. It just instantly updates the viewfinder. Like, oh, this is what I'm going to get. Oh, cool, okay.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like, wow, I can totally see the difference. Whereas, I don't think any other phones right now are showing real-time HDR on the display that I'm aware of, anyway. Maybe LG, but I don't remember. Maybe in a software update. Others
out there. They all get jumbled up, right? Like instantly. I know right now there are 55 people out there going like, "No, what are you talking about? It's on these 7 phones." And I'm like, but I can't think of them because it's.
But it's 7 phones, right? It's not the majority. Like, it's a new feature, and it's a great new feature, and I'd like to see more of it. But OIS defines it for me. That's why at this point because the 6 is so bulky and the battery life really isn't that hugely great. And because my Nexus 5 has OIS, and even though the camera on the Nexus 5 has been criticized, I take great shots with the Nexus 5 camera. Of all the Nexuses up to the 6, which I really haven't had a chance to play with long enough to really form a good opinion on the camera, of all the Nexuses, the 5 has the hardware chops it needs to have a good camera.
It does. Yeah, I did an Nexus 5 versus 6 comparison last week, and I took a bunch of side-by-side photos and saw what it. And you know what? It surprised me is that I could not get consistently better results with the 6. Sometimes the shot would be better. Like sometimes that kind of exposure problem the 5 would have, where it would overexpose sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes that would be fixed in certain shots, but in others, the 5 would outperform the 6. And it confused me. I couldn't. But then when I thought about it, it's a Motorola sensor, and
I think it's not just that. I think it's a Google implementation of the camera app and camera imaging stack on Android, on Nexus, on pure Android. That's why LG consistently beats in its own software, its own camera, the performance of any Nexus device. That's why Apple does so good with the iPhone. It's not the hardware isn't really that much better nowadays. It's just the software implementation. That's also why Nokia does such a good job generally, or Microsoft devices does such a great job with their Lumias that have OIS.
Yeah, it's always
really
interesting
tricky
to see how that, like what used to be the case with Sony in the days of the Z1 and around there, they had really, really crappy camera output, even though it was Sony who was providing sensors to Apple, say for the iPhone, and the iPhone shots would outclass it. I'm sorry, and I misspoke a second ago. I forgot the Nexus 60 uses a Sony sensor. It's not a Motorola sensor. So
yeah, it is a Sony sensor. So this is the thing that blows my mind, is that Sony and LG are pretty much the ones making OIS sensors right now. Samsung is starting to. But if you are like an OEM and you want to make a phone, like if you are, OnePlus and you want to make the OnePlus 2 and you're looking for a sensor with OIS, your choices are like super thin. Like you get 2 or 3 choices.
So, is the OIS question going to govern what phone you pick up off your review desk first for review? Are you going to grab like the 830 or something?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think OIS has its challenges in the sense that it encourages long exposures, which are a problem if you're trying to capture moving subjects, like people that are running around in low light. So what you need is some really intelligent software, image analysis, that tells you, this is clearly a kind of a landscape shot where I'm taking a picture of of like the city or the country, and use OIS there, and then but here I'm in a setting where there's a lot of motion. And in the viewfinder, and maybe focus distances are shorter, and do not use as much OIS. Use a little bit, but don't have long exposure because you're going to bump up the ISO and do more noise reduction maybe. So Apple has really nailed that. Very few, and I think that's why you see a lot of manufacturers staying away from OIS right now, because it's a huge software challenge, right? Because just opening the shutter doesn't solve the problem, right? You're gonna get lots of motion blur if you do that. So because of subjects moving, and sometimes you want that. I really honestly think that, speaking of cameras, that another thing I really want in my camera phones, other than OIS, is manual controls, which currently only two choices, right? Microsoft devices on most of their cameras, and HTC on most of their cameras.
Yep.
And I cannot understand for the life of me why there isn't the mode, just like HTC's done. You just switch modes, and all of a sudden you're in manual controls.
We should acknowledge LG there too, though, because they're one of the only OEMs that gives you manual focus on some of their phones, and that's something that I find really underrepresented, and I really like manual focus, because sometimes it's just not smart enough. You want to take a picture of that leaf.
Totally, and then the laser autofocus has been a big step forward. I think the G3 is still one of my favorite phones of this year, and primarily because there's imaging chops. But I do wish it had more manual controls. They actually pulled back from the G2 and removed things like white balance, and even EV. You can't set the exposure value, so you often overexpose.
Really? I had forgotten that.
You have to use a third-party camera if you want to set those things, which is really annoying.
Yeah. Right. And then we shouldn't probably get into the hardware shutter key, because we'll probably talk about it all day.
Well, I want to see that on all phones, but I've already given up on this. It's like I used to want to have a physical cover on the lens, like something you can slide away that protects the lens, like some of the earlier Nokias had.
Nokia ones did, yeah.
And the thickness has kind of killed that, right? There's no room to put that anymore. And the sapphire glass used on most lenses is good enough that you can't really scratch the lens that easily anymore. So, but you put your fingerprints on it. The first thing I always do when I pull out my phones before I take a photo is wipe them on the inside of my hoodie or my t-shirt.
Absolutely. And with the Nexus 6, let me tell you, it's way easy to smudge the lens, because the dimple that Motorola handily puts there is nice, but it's not as pronounced as the X, and it's so close to the lens. I'm like, I'll be feeling it out in my pocket. I'm like, oh, there's the dimple. No, I just smudged up the camera lens. I'm an idiot.
So anyway, we've kind of diverged into OIS and cameras, which is inevitable on my podcast. But I wanted to take it. What is your take on the Nexus 6 we've kind of talked about. It's big, and it's really a matter of taste. I've used big phones. I've used like phones like the what's it called, the Lumia 1520. I've
1520,
used phones like the G Flex last year, which was a 6-inch phone.
yeah.
So it's not like impossible. I can deal with it. I've got a G Pro 2 that I reviewed a while back, which is like a gigantic G3 basically.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's Korea only, I think. But anyway, I got one of those, and these I can live with them. So I think I can live with the Nexus 6, and once I get it, I'm sure I'll live with it for a while. But I'm just think they kind of missed the boat on making a giant phone for Lollipop. I wish that they'd stuck with me a 5.5-inch, very little bezel, OIS, top-notch specs type phone.
I think that would have been reasonable, but you know, the other side of me says, well, Google couldn't have sat on the sidelines forever with this phablet craze, right? I mean, I feel like the time to question it as a trend is over, right? We know that the large screen phones are starting to dominate or have been dominating the market, and so I understand why they wanted to do one Nexus handset at least as a phablet type thing. I just and also, you know, you get something for that too. On the top and bottom, you have these dual front-firing speakers, which are
That's
it
nice.
outclasses even the new Moto X,
Why
which only has
does the
one
X
front-firing
not
speaker.
have that? The G has
I
that.
know.
What
The Moto G?
The
Oh,
Moto G has two speakers.
does it have two front fire? Oh yeah, we've had this conversation before, and
Yes.
I always forget what the. Yeah, I don't know, but even so, I don't mind that sacrifice on the X. At least they took the one speaker on the phone and they faced it the right direction. Like, I'll take that. So I don't know, you know, and it's got a pretty good looking screen unless you ratchet the brightness all the way down so it turns pink. But you know, these things I'm willing to overlook when you're talking about this something this big. So I don't know. It's you get used to it, right? I mean, you know, as we did with the Flex.
How do you feel about the fact that, you know, basically using the Nexus 6 or the Nexus 5 with Lollipop doesn't really change the user experience? Everything is just scaled up in size.
That infuriates me because, you know, for all the crap we give Samsung, but Samsung's our favorite whipping boy if you're asking me, when you're talking about skins, when you're talking about a third-party UI layered on top of Android. I don't like TouchWiz and whatever. But at least in exchange for that impaired graphical experience, you get added features like multi-window that let you use this canvas more intelligently, let you run two apps side by side if you want, and that's really handy sometimes. And then Google has, like Apple, has just said, no, you just have a larger display, and you're going to do exactly the same thing as you would on, you know, on a smaller display. It's just more bigger. Like, well, I don't.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I'm very happy with Lollipop on my Nexus 5, and I'm wondering when I get my Nexus 6, other than my 5 kind of dying slowly, I think the battery is dying, whether I'm gonna switch, because the performance on my Nexus 5 is brilliant. I have to say, like, let's take a step back, but Lollipop is a major step forward for Android. I think it's fantastic. I don't think anybody would argue that it's the way to go. And I am very, very happy with it.
Oh, it's gorgeous. I mean, it's the first time that I've said and believed, I think, that Android is gorgeous. I liked what they did with Ice Cream Sandwich. I even liked some of the stuff in Honeycomb. It was this Tron-like, very techy, you know, sci-fi looking thing.
Yeah.
But this is a much friendlier place, and all the little details, like when you unlock, how the notification cards neatly stack under one another before sliding up out of the way, and how the clock fades behind. Just these tiny little touches that don't impact performance that much, if at all. I think that's terrific, and it's this attention to detail that we've been missing in Android for a while.
Yeah, I love it, and I love the new, you know, the new apps that go along with it. You know, the material design stuff. I actually think the calendar is fantastic. A lot of people don't like it, but I'm like, seriously, it's really great for me. So. I don't know.
Could have downsized the text a little bit. I feel like if people are complaining about the calendar, like, you know, you've got these appointment blocks, which you can't see because I'm overexposed on my stupid webcam, but, you know, these appointment blocks. I have an appointment tomorrow at 1 p.m. Did you see if? I don't know. I mean, obviously this is a reminder to myself about something, but I have to tap on it to. And with a display of this high resolution, I shouldn't have to do that. I should be able to see the entire line of text, you know. So I get some of the complaints.
And it's interesting. Yeah, go on.
Well, I was going to ask you about some of the the tweaks they made to it, not the twerks they made to it, but the tweaks they made
Twerks.
to like the yeah, some like the
Oh
like in the
my, this could this is not gonna end well, is it?
right. We're already going down this. No, it's like when you pull down the notification shade about how you can't press and hold the Wi-Fi thing anymore to go to the Wi-Fi menu, how you have to like tap the word.
Yeah, there's that, and the big thing that's vexing me is the holding the power key, not giving me airplane mode.
Oh my
I'm
God.
just sorry.
Or notification
Or
options.
notifications
Do
or
you,
anything.
you
Yeah.
probably listen to podcasts on your phone, right? You listen.
Uh-huh.
And when you're listening to music, you can't change the ringer state. You have to not
I
only
know.
stop playback, you have to throw away that app in order to change your ringer state. It's just ridiculous. I mean, what
They
some of
need to
these
fix
things
that.
they do. There were some oversights in this, so it's not perfect.
But everything else, it's just it's just been a breath of fresh air for me. And I first experienced it with the Nexus 9. I did not upgrade my Nexus 5, with beta versions. I kind of it's my workhorse. It's my everyday drive. I don't want to take any chances with it, so I just leave it to wait for the updates to arrive. And so the Nexus 9 was my first experience with Lollipop, and again, it's not as optimized to a tablet experience as it could be, but it is not. I still enjoyed it, and I think it's not bad. What is your take about Lollipop on a tablet?
I think I actually like it better on a tablet because I don't run into as many of those issues as I do on the phone. We use phones and tablets differently, and I think just the way
For
I
sure.
use my tablets versus how I use my phones, I run into fewer of the roadblocks that Lollipop sort of throws up, like that ringer state notification thing. It just doesn't matter as much on a tablet. The issue I had with the Nexus 9 is the Tegra processor. Not
Yeah.
a lot of apps were optimized for that, and so I would just kind of get crashes, and it was weird. But it was my first experience too on the Nexus 9 was with Lollipop. That was my first breath of the new Android, and I just couldn't get over it for a week or 10 days or more. I just couldn't get over how beautiful it was and how
Hmm.
friendly it felt and how accessible it felt. I felt like this is a thing I can show to my mother and be like, this is how this works, and she would not recoil in horror, and
I agree. I agree, especially with all the Google apps. Everything seems really seamless and well integrated.
yeah.
As for the Nexus 9 itself, there's a lot of things to like about the hardware other than the price. I can't fathom why they're priced it at whatever it is, $399.
It is $399 to start, yeah. And
It's
and
not worth that. It's just not
can I
worth
ask?
that.
Does yours have the much
Oh
talked
yeah.
about trampoline
Oh
back
yeah.
problem?
Of
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just, and
It's pretty terrible. In fact, mine, if you look very carefully, I don't have it reachable, otherwise I'd pull it out. But it's in my bag. You can see a bump in one point. Like
oh,
you can see
it's like
there's
visible.
clearly some piece of hardware under there that's pushing up against the back. But at another space, I can push it down.
Yeah.
You're like
Yeah,
cringe.
it's such a shame. And
And
even if it
look,
weren't for that, like the design is just so, to have HTC come in to build that design, it just seems like a bit of a waste to me
it's
because
like
they
an
could do
Nexus
so much
5
better.
with
Exactly. Just
scaled up.
expanded. Right. And that's not
And
what gets
sure,
me
it has
excited.
metal sides, and it has a beautiful display, and it has boom sound speakers, and it has double tap to wake, which, by the way, how can that not be a standard feature in all of Lollipop?
It should be a standard feature on every phone by now.
Exactly.
In
It
addition
drives
to,
me nuts.
it's in the same category as like pulling your phone out of your pocket and having the display wake up in a power saving mode like the Moto X does, or like
Yep,
the Nexus 6 does sometimes, or like the Lumia line does. That should happen on every phone. There are
I
some
agree.
things that are you should need on a
So
smartphone.
my
Well,
biggest gripe with the 9 is the price. I mean, I think it's great as it is. If it was $299, perfect. But look, and $399 buys you last year's iPad Air. It buys you an iPad Mini with the new one with a thumb,
Touch
whatever.
ID. Yeah.
And the old one is $100 cheaper. And honestly, when you look at how well those are made in comparison, it's just night and day. And then you have the whole tablet ecosystem on iOS, which is significantly better than anything Android can bring to the table. I hate to say this because I'm a huge Android fangirl, but you got to admit when it comes to tablet apps, it's night and day.
I did that exact comparison. It was iPad Air 2 versus Nexus 9, and what always happens on those videos is that the comments descend into a massive
know.
firestorm. But it didn't happen that time. Like, people would go out of their way to come on and be like, normally I would just come in here and stick up for Android, but no, you're right. Get the iPad Air 2. Like, it was unbelievable. So
And it just kind of makes me wonder because, look, it's been what, 4 years since Honeycomb, right? 4 years since the
yeah,
Motorola Zoom.
Zoom, yeah, 2010, right?
And here
2011.
we are, and and Google and Android still don't have the tablet experience nailed.
Yeah, and it's not Android's fault. Android as a base layer, it does it
It's
very
fine.
well.
Yeah.
But it's that app ecosystem where they can't seem to be able to cajole developers on a massive scale to build tablet versions of the apps that people are looking for. Then again, I will say this: it has stopped bothering me as I've gotten used to it.
Yeah.
It's not as ugly as it used to be, like in the days of the what
Oh,
was the
Honeycomb.
first Galaxy Tab, and
Oh,
yeah, and
the
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 Zoom, and
original, the what was it, gingerbread version of whatever? No,
yes, yes.
gingerbread. It was before that. It was
Oh,
what was before gingerbread?
Froyo.
Froyo.
Yeah. So we still had the
The
differently colored status
Froyo.
bar up
No,
top,
even
right?
before that. What was before that?
FG. What's before F in the alphabet? E.
E,
What was E? Eclair? Yeah.
Eclair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the Galaxy Tab 7-inch, the original, was running Eclair, I think.
Yeah, I don't remember.
It
I don't
was just
remember
like
if
a
it's
gigantic phone. It was like the Nexus
it
6
was it was
today.
like a giant phone. I was at an Engadget reader meetup at the time. I was not in the industry yet, and that was my first time seeing it. And I remember the Samsung reps being absolutely overwhelmed by the interest at that table. Though the table was like 6 rows deep of people trying to get their hands on what was being marketed as the first iPad competitor, and it took them a few generations to, I think, get to that point. And I would still rather take a note line over any of the. Have you seen the new tabs, by the way, the new Galaxy
No,
Tab?
I haven't played since like I think I've lost track because every year they're called Tab and they look exactly the same as the year before and they update the
Right.
specs.
But
The
this
last gen
year,
I played with I think was Gen 3.
okay, because the
Gen
4 is
3,
like
two
markedly
years ago.
better. Like I sat around and I was like kind of like whatever, and I don't. We didn't even review it because they offered it so late, and we were like, oh, we're on to other stuff. Thank you, but no, thank you. And then I played with one at like an AT&T event. I was like, this is really well made, and this screen is really beautiful. So I think the tab line is coming
I
good.
like the idea of the 12-inch one that I saw at CES last year with the
Yeah.
keyboard that let you do chords, which I thought was really cool. Like so you could go Control C actually worked. Like
What
you
like a
Control and you type C and then it lets you copy text.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
see that. Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
notice that.
and the keyboard looks like a skeuomorphic version of a real keyboard because it's Samsung, of course.
Oh, of course,
But that
right.
was that was that was the whole gimmick of the Tab Pros was that they had a better keyboard that was more like the experience you get on a laptop.
Right.
And I have to say, it worked really well. It looked silly because skeuomorphism looks silly, but being able to chord keys and hold them together was kind of pretty delicious, to be honest.
I'll say this. Anytime you can
Um,
give me a persistent number row, I'm happy. That's all I need.
that's the other thing. I think it had that because of the
Yeah.
screen real estate on that 12-inch tablet. But honestly, for me, I'm not a tablet person anyway, so I'm the wrong person to ask. But if I had to pick a tablet today, it would be an iPad Mini 3. 3? Yeah. The
Yeah, the
one
one
with
without the Touch ID, right?
or with or without, doesn't
Or
really
or
matter to
with
me.
the Touch. Oh yeah, the 3 is the
Well,
newest one. Yeah.
the 3, I guess, because it's the right size, it's got a great display, and it's got a great app ecosystem. But I'm not a tablet user, so I've got a bunch of tablets here. I've got an original Mini, I have Nexus 7, Nexus 9, Nexus 10, and I think that's it. I've returned most of the other ones. I used to have a bunch of the old Nexus 7s and a bunch of the Galaxy Tabs, and I think I've sent those back now.
What about the
But
Xperia? The
I've never actually played with. Well, I played with them hands-on, but not like at home. In the evening in my
Can I tell
bed,
you, once you get
relaxed.
those things off of the stupid,
So thin.
anti-theft cord, it's so thin. It's like it doesn't even seem like you should be able to do this in the world. Like it's like, wow, this is super thin, and I can hold it with one hand horizontally, and it's light enough that it's still comfortable, and then I can throw it in my bathtub for no reason, and it'll survive.
Yeah,
It's
the waterproofing, water resistance is a huge deal, I think.
yeah,
But the takeaway for Nexus and Olipop is pretty good job overall. I'm not convinced the Nexus 6. I'm the both the pieces, both of the pieces of hardware here have their issues. I think size for me is the biggest issue for the Nexus 6, and price is the biggest issue for the
price.
Nexus 9.
Well, isn't price a huge issue for you on the 6 too, though?
Well, it is, but I'm willing to pay full price for a really well-made device, and it looks really well-made.
And it is that. Yeah.
So I agree that's a change, and in that sense, the Nexus 5 really wins. I mean, you can't go wrong. Buying a Nexus 5 today as a 1-year-old phone, it's the first time I've ever felt this way about a Nexus, where the previous Nexus didn't instantly, to me, become completely obsolete.
I had to kind of think on it for a little while before I rendered a sort of verdict on the Nexus 5 versus Nexus 6 thing. And I'm not in your boat in terms of the Nexus 5 look. I've always thought it was a little too
It's a little
nondescript.
cheap. Yeah.
It's a little chintzy. It's a little kind of dull. So I'm getting reamed in the comments for that because so many people have Nexus 5s and they hate that. But that's okay. So, but I said that the Nexus 5, exactly this is the point you just made, is the phone to buy right now if you want a pure Android phone and you don't want to be on a contract, you want to save some money. It's still a wonderful buy. But if you're looking for a phone on a carrier contract, which will bring this down to $199 or $24 a month for 18 months or whatever it is. Then this becomes a really compelling buy as long as you can get past
Except on
this
AT&T.
yeah, what AT&T is, what are they
Because they
pricing
have the
around?
brand in the back, they have the boot logo, they have it. In fact, they have it locked,
Of
and
course.
they have the stupid AT&T ringers on it.
Yes, which are the worst
Like
ringtones
seriously,
in
I
the
hate to
market.
say this because I know that a lot of people have gone into great detail that it's just different partitions that have all of this stuff provisioned because Android lets you do that now. But to me, that's a fake Nexus. I am sorry. If you do buy a Nexus that is not factory unlocked and has any kind of carrier branding on it, you failed at buying a Nexus.
And you know what's funny? I did that. I did that with the Verizon Galaxy Nexus, and it burned me for the next 18
But
months.
that was a particularly bad case, though, right?
Terrible
I mean,
case.
that
Yeah.
had different firmware, right? Like we're
Yes, and there was
talking
the
here
CDMA
at least,
problem.
right? At least here we have the same firmware. It's just the boot screen and the ringers and the stamp in the back, and then unlocking the radio. Seriously, AT&T? Seriously?
It's odd to
It's a
me.
Nexus.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Google just said no. You said that you can brand it if you want, but you cannot lock this thing. Not happening. I just don't get it. I just
I agree.
And you look at T-Mobile, they did it right. They're a Nexus is just a Nexus.
And T-Mobile, that's exactly what I would expect from them at this juncture. I mean, that is completely in line with the culture of that disruptive company who wants to appeal to people like us, or even people who just really like this independent idea, this like underdog thing. No, I don't want your brand on my phone. Just it's my phone, right? I'm young.
So
and
there's
hip. Cater to me.
for sure. And I wonder. I mean, I've actually not played with the T-Mobile version, so I might be wrong. There might be some customization on there. It might be locked. I don't know. I hope not. I mean, it'd be terrible if it was.
Maybe
What about the
just
Verizon?
wrong
Is there
together.
a Sprint version?
There is a Sprint version,
Sprint?
and there is a Verizon version, or there's going to be as well. So, I mean, this thing is
But
on all
I
fours.
bet I cannot imagine if the AT&T version is branded and locked and has a partition with the boot screen and the ringers. It's gotta the Verizon one. It's gonna have the same. You know it.
Absolutely, yeah. No,
You know
Verizon. Then again, there was a version of the Droid Turbo that didn't have any Verizon branding on it at all.
Really?
Yeah, the ballistic nylon one, and I think this is because they couldn't put the silk screening on the ballistic nylon material, like they couldn't actually paint it on there. But yeah, there was no if just looking at it, all you saw was a Motorola logo. Like it looked like a weird alternate universe Nexus. It was interesting. Yeah.
There's a question here that I think is actually interesting. We were talking about cameras and how OIS is important, and one of the things that Microsoft Devices has really nailed over the years, and Nokia prior to that, is audio recording.
Yes.
By having multiple mics, the Icon, the 930, the 1520, the 1020, and I believe even the 830, which I'm looking down at here, have multiple mics. And do and they have MEMS mics, which will not distort in very loud levels. So if you had a very loud rock concert, you can have a very clear recording.
Yeah.
We're not seeing too much of that on Android devices yet, and I'm wondering if this is something that you see as the next big thing for Android. To me, the problem with imaging on Android is this lack of consistency, right? On Nexus devices, Google's software isn't good enough, and on the competition, HTC is doing it right, but their hardware is flawed now with no OIS. It's Samsung and LG are doing kind of a decent job, but they're moving more towards the iPhone way of doing things. It used to be you could hold the camera shutter key, and if you turned on burst mode in the settings, it would let you lock focus and exposure while your thumb was on the button.
Oh, that's right.
And
Yeah.
then be able to reframe and release your finger. That's all gone now on LG and Samsung phones. It's just burst mode, and you can't turn it off. So they seem to be going backwards. Do you think someone, like maybe that Panasonic CM1, that Lumix smartphone
Oh,
that was
right.
announced,
Yeah.
do you think there's going to be somebody who nails the user experience and gives us something similar to what Microsoft Devices is giving us in terms of both the hardware with like 4 microphones, OIS, great optics, and a really, really compelling camera user experience?
You know, I would hope so, but I'm forced to look at the market as, you know, there are these OEMs who are like, okay, what are the opportunities? Who has done something really excellent with a camera? Oh, yeah, the Lumia line, the 1020 especially, and all that. But what kind of success has that line seen? Not that much. And you can argue that that's Windows Phone fault, you know, there's Microsoft's fault, it's Nokia, old Nokia's fault, whatever. But you know, I don't think there's a massive incentive to do that. On the Android side. But then again, OEMs are always looking for an opportunity to stand out. So my short answer is I would hope so, but I don't really see it being more of a possibility than trying to differentiate on, say, fit and finish. You know?
It'd be interesting to see if, and I've selected the next question, which is interesting to see that if Lollipop, that exposes a whole bunch of new APIs for camera software, if some third party can finally make it, because the problem with me with Android is I don't use third-party cameras, because other than the Google one from time to time. For example, on the OnePlus One, I use the Google camera because I find that OnePlus's camera app is terrible. It is horrendously bad. It has lag like you wouldn't believe, and it turns out that for the first time ever, the Android camera is better than anything than the built-in stock camera, which is rarely the case.
Yeah.
But anyway, now that Lollipop exposes much more API control to the camera, I wonder if somebody's going to make a third-party camera app that's actually going to do things like RAW support, you know, all the proper stuff that I want to see.
You know who was going to do that? Was ZTE. At CES, whatever last year's CES was, they promised, or this year's CES, they promised that they would release their viewfinder as a wide release in the Google Play Store for any phone to download. And the thing I loved about their viewfinder on the Nubia 5S is what I guess we were looking at, is that it had an artificial horizon. And I've wanted that on some of my cameras for a while because it would really help me out in some situations.
I think the Lumix has that. The Lumix CX, the CM1, because it's actually pretty common on point and shoots and you know, higher end camera. There's generally a toggle you can set in the menus for turning that on. It's really useful, right?
Yeah, it's really useful, and there was other stuff on it too. It wasn't just that. It wasn't a one-trick pony. It was a really good viewfinder, and I was so excited to 1, try the phone, 2, try that download on other phones. They never sent us a Nubia 5S, and then it's still not in the Google Play Store as far as I can tell. So. Still waiting on it.
Well, I'm hoping because right now, you know, I haven't really found the one yet that really works for me. And I have to say that even though the iPhone doesn't give me the level of control that I want, I wish there was a setting somewhere deep in the iPhone menus that was like advanced and the UI changed into something that looked like the Lumias, you know.
Yeah, totally.
But still, I nail the fixtures so often with the iPhone. Even though I don't have a 6, I still just have a 5S, and it's really impressive to me what Apple's managed to do there, and it's gotten better with iOS 8. So, so if you are listening out there, those of you, like I think HTC might be your chance. You have the best camera interface I think today with manual controls. Make your camera app an Android APK that can be downloaded from the Play Store for any Android device running Lollipop.
And HTC is already doing that with some of its other software, with the Zoe.
Exactly. I challenge you. Yeah. You will be saving the day for everyone if you can do that.
That would be really cool to see.
Yeah, right. Let's see. Let's talk about Microsoft devices a bit and some of the phones I have here, because you know I want this podcast to be about an hour, and we're like already 45 minutes in.
Yeah.
I've just published 2 reviews: the Yoda Phone First Gen and the Desire 816. And in the next couple of days, you will see a review of the Fire Phone and a review of the Butterfly 2. And I don't know if you know this, but the Butterfly 2 is an HTC One M8 made of plastic with the dual camera, but instead of a 4-megapixel ultra pixel sensor, it has a 13-megapixel non-ultra pixel, the same sensor as in the HTC Desire Eye. And
Yes,
I tell you,
the new one.
I'm willing to forego the large pixels for a little bit more resolution in this case. So
And
that's.
Yes, sorry, I don't know if you were done there or not, but that is.
No, I was just gonna say that's my takeaway on the Butterfly 2 is that even though it's plastic, it has what the camera combo should have been on the original M8, in my opinion.
And it's so important to like make the distinction though between the Butterfly 2 and the other HTC devices that had the earlier 13-megapixel sensor,
Correct.
which was like this off-the-shelf
like the Desire
component.
816 and like
And the One Mini 2.
One Mini 2, yeah.
Yeah.
But the Desire 820, the Desire Eye, and the Butterfly 2 have the better sensor.
Yeah, and so have you used the Desire Eye with the crazy front firing 13
I have
megapixel?
very briefly. Again, Brad helped me with that, but I'm getting a review unit very soon, so I should be able to play with it. I love the idea. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's cool. I was sad that I couldn't do it because I was overloaded with something, and so Joe got to do it for us. And like, I'm looking forward to doing the review rebuttal on that one because I got to play with it in New York for a little bit, and now it's been a little while. But it's got a hardware shutter key. It's got a pretty good 13-megapixel front facer and aft facer,
It's the same module
and
on the
it's
front
water
and the
resistant.
back.
Say again? It's the same, but there's an f stop difference though, or an F number difference rather. Yeah, so I don't. Yeah, I don't know why they did. We asked about it, but I forgot what the answer was.
But I'll be getting that, and I'll be getting an HTC Re very soon. So stay tuned for that. So the phones that I have to review still are the Moto X2, which I showed you earlier right here. This is an AT&T model. I have a Moto G2, which is a very funky colored one that I have. Check it out. It's a purple one with a white front. And it's been a great phone, I have to say. Like the Moto G last year, they kicked ass, and this year they totally nailed it again. In terms of price, I mean, if you want a mid-range phone and you're on a budget, you can't go wrong with the G. Like, even though it's bigger this year, they've improved everything that was needed to be improved. So, I have a Sharp Aquos Crystal, which is a very interesting phone.
So jealous of you. Did you get that from Sprint?
From Sprint, yeah, Sprint. Yeah, I asked for it a while back, and so I only wanted this because I am fascinated with the idea of the no bezel, right?
Totally.
And
yes.
Every time I pull this out, I feel like every time people see me pull this out, they're like, "What is this sci-fi thing you just pulled out?
Did you just step out of Minority Report 2?" Like,
exactly. It feels like you have a movie prop in your hand because the screen just floats over everything else.
Yes.
I have a OnePlus One. Finally, I was able to get a review unit instead of buying my own. And I have to tell you, this is definitely one of the best phones I've ever used. But the camera is just not good enough for me to take it as my daily driver and replace my Nexus 5.
Nah.
No OIS, and as I said, the camera interface that's built in is really terrible. There's incredible delay and lag in shooting compared to, say, using the Android camera even.
But it's Sandstone.
But it's beautiful. It's a Sandstone, 64 gigabytes. It's got too much bezel for me. Like, I'm used to the G3 as a 5.5-inch phone, right? So look at all this bezel, including this little silver rim down all the way around. If you can live with the bezel, because this is almost the same size as a Nexus 6, but it's only 5.5 inches. So it's kind of like the iPhone 6 Plus. It's bezel central, as I call it.
Importantly, though, it's narrower, right? So it's easier to use with one hand, and that's really crucial.
I also have a Galaxy Alpha, which I really, really, really like.
I adore that thing.
This is my favorite Samsung phone of the year, and I also have a Note 4, and I played with the Edge, although the Edge is really cool. I played with this, sadly, an AT&T one. I played with the GS5, which I have as well, but I have to say, like, finally, Samsung is making a phone that feels like it's not a turd in my hand.
Right? It felt so cool. It was so unnatural feeling to me to geek out over that phone because, like, I unbox it and I'm like, how do I like this much? I don't understand how I can like this much, and I really do. It's amazing.
And so I have, of course, a Note 4 as well. Yeah. This is a T-Mobile version. And it's finally, like, I've always been a big fan of the Note, but the thing that always put me off was the plasticiness. And again, this is like the Alpha. It's gorgeous. Finally, Samsung, kudos. Of course, we still have to deal with all the bullshit that is TouchWiz, but on the Note 4, it works because it brings you all this extra stuff that's actually useful on that size phone, right?
Do you use the S Pen at all, by the way?
Not myself, but I have to say that when I do play with it, it's nice to have some of the extra apps, right? Like I could live without it, which is why I think the Galaxy Alpha would be more my thing. But I've got the default Android launcher on both of these, and it's relatively nice of an experience.
So you're just running the Google launcher on both of those?
On all my phones now, I've switched completely over. I'm running I'm trying to Nexify my devices as much as I can, except that I usually keep the camera app unless the camera app is really terrible.
Right.
Because I prefer.
Sorry, I wanted to do that with the Galaxy Alpha, like because it was such a beautiful piece of hardware, and I was like, oh, if we can get TouchWiz out of here, that'd be great. But I didn't have the time to.
Well, you're not getting it out, right? You still have the pull-down menu and notification tree. All that is still the same. The multitask menu is the same as before. And the thing that always gets me about TouchWiz, honestly, I can turn off S Voice. I can disable on the AT&T version all the apps that you can't delete. All that I've done. And I've replaced the launcher, but the thing is the settings. The Samsung settings.
Oh man!
Just thinking about it, I get a headache.
I think we could go back and forth on that for a while because I liked it for a minute, and then they gave it to the carriers to customize, and now I don't like it anymore. So I didn't mind the floating orbs of color. I think they looked pretty cool, and especially since you can just search for what you want. You can hit the magnifying glass.
It's just a consistency thing, right? For me, it's just like I'm used to Android looking and feeling a certain way, and they break that every time. You know, and an HTC phone, it doesn't feel so foreign coming from a Lollipop device, right? Yeah. From a Nexus, for example, right? Okay, so let's continue here. I have, and I have a bunch of Microsoft devices. So I got a 530 a while back, which is a total, really bad phone. Like, they went so low end that the camera doesn't even have autofocus. And it's that bad. But I got the 930 a while back. I reviewed that a while back. I took it to Burning Man with me. But I got the 630 dual SIM, and I have to say, I'm sure the 535 that's just come out, the first non-Nokia branded device, is going to even be better than this for the money. But this, wow, like the camera on this is actually really quite usable, which is unbelievable for a 5-megapixel autofocus entry-level camera. But the one that's got me even more impressed is the 735, and I have a beautiful orange 735.
Wow!
That
you
display
could get rescued from a boat with that thing.
Yeah, look at this. Look at this AMOLED 720p display. It's so gorgeous. It's a little exposed here.
Is it 4.5 inches?
4.7, 720p AMOLED. It is absolutely gorgeous display, and it's got the same camera as the 720 last year, which is a f/1.9.
Really?
Lens.
Whoa.
It's super fast. It's a 6.7 megapixels Zeiss lens, no OIS. f/1.9. So it is so slow light sensitive, it's unreal.
But the big deal on that one was its front facer, right? Because that's supposed to be their selfie cam, right?
It's 5 megapixels.
5 megapixels? Yeah. Is it wide angle too? We were at the Microsoft thing in Berlin when they announced it, and I just forgot what the stuff was.
You know, I have to say the 735 for the money, the only thing it's missing is it only has 8 gigs of built-in storage. You really need it has micro SD, but you need to put a card in. Is basically you pretty much have from the get-go to put a card in, and it doesn't have a camera shutter key. And for a selfie phone, that's a bit weird. But everything else about it is great. It's got LTE and everything. And by the way, the 630 that I showed you earlier, that's what it looks like. The screen. It's a pretty nice screen. It's
is it LCD?
You know, it's LCD, but it's much better than the 530. It looks like it might be even IPS, but entry-level IPS. And then there's the 830, and the 830 is I'm very impressed with. Let me just bring it up. This is the 830. I have a beautiful green one. And so this is one step up from the 735 again. The thing that's disappointing, though, is that it's a 5-inch display, 720p, but it's an IPS panel, and it has really terrible black levels. If you put it side by side with the 4.7-inch,
730.
720p panel of the 735. You want the 735 because you get better DPI because it's a smaller screen. You get better black levels. Everything is better.
And on Windows Phone especially, you want the deep blacks because that's what the tiles float on. You want the tiles to be floating on a sea of nothing.
Honestly, the most disappointing thing on the 830 is the display, but the camera is pretty damn awesome. It's OIS, pure view, 10 megapixels. Dedicated camera key. I love the industrial design. It's super thin. It's got that
Aluminum
nice little metal
sides,
rim,
right? Yeah.
like the 930. Dedicated camera button, and of course micro SD for expansion. I mean, I tell you, Microsoft devices. I know I sound like a fangirl, but I've always had a soft spot for Nokia, which became Microsoft devices, and even though and Windows Phone I think is a really great OS for non-advanced users. I think I can't use a Lumia as my daily driver because I'm too invested in Google services.
We're too embedded in Google, right? Because the Lumia 1020 is my other phone, so like whenever I have to switch over to it because I want to take it on a weekend, I have to be like, okay, you're not going to get like the tabs in Gmail, like all the spam is going to dump into your main inbox. It's like, okay, fine.
But it doesn't change the fact that Windows Phone is delightful, and it doesn't change the fact that the hardware is delightful, and they just know how to make phones like no one else. Like I seriously cannot. I wish the 830 and the 930 you could run Android on, and that Microsoft devices would make an Android camera that had the app that had the same interface, and I'd be done. I would forego the Nexus for the first time in my life.
I like how tightly integrated though the software and hardware are on a Windows device. I like how some of the designs echo the look and feel of the live tiles. I like it's just.
I know, but with imagine Lollipop. Come on, Michael.
I don't know.
Think of the sweetness of Lollipop.
You need to talk to me a lot to give me. I'd need a custom spin on there. I'd actually advocate for a third-party UI if I had to use Android and Lumia, but.
So these are the ones I'm going to be reviewing. I'm not sure I'll review the 630, to be honest with you, in the same way as I didn't review the 530. But I'm definitely going to review the 735 and the 830. And these other phones I just showed you are all going to be happening this month because they all landed on my plate in November, kind of behind everybody else's time-wise. So it's just going to have to happen, right?
Well, let me tell you, you're not all the way behind. We have an 830 in the office, which I unboxed on a previous episode of my podcast, but it's in a colleague's hands, and he has yet to review it. So you may beat us to the punch on that. So don't feel bad.
So a couple of things before we go. There's a question here in the Q&A. What do you think about the lack of a new flagship from Microsoft this holiday season? I'd like to argue that the 535 is a flagship in its own right, but a different kind of flagship. It is a price-competitive, large-screened, well-rounded flagship. I'm going to be getting one very soon, and I can guarantee you it's going to be a pretty awesome phone. Now, I know what you're saying. You want a 930, you want an Icon, a 940 or a 1030. A 1030.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the 1030. Where is the 1030?
Right, because it popped up on... I don't, now that these rumors have popped up today. Some people on Twitter very helpfully sent me the link, and I very unhelpfully lost it just now. But it was this, it looked like a Lumia 1020. It had a mostly aluminum back with some polycarbonate trim around it, the same size camera Oreo as the 1020, and it looked like it was packing a 1080p display and some other upgrade in terms of the spec sheet. It looked really compelling, and the fact that it looks like we're not getting it, because this was just a prototype that was pictured and put up for auction on, I think, a Chinese auction site. It strikes me as really odd. And then again, Microsoft just acquired Nokia, so we have this distraction factor here, right? We have this thing where they're having to make some different decisions. It's not the same company, and they're maybe adapting a new strategy as they look at what Windows Phone's future is going to be like. But not having a follow-up to the 1020 is getting really frustrating.
It hurts.
The 1020 is aging. You know, it's got. You look at it
I feel the same way. You know, the 1020 still blows my mind. Like the 930 was okay at Burning Man, but the year prior I used the 1020, and I was kind of regretting I didn't take the 1020 again.
Oh,
it is so much. It's so much better.
When you go to do the pinch to zoom and doesn't go as far as the 1020, it's really disappointing because it's that half the resolution, right?
Oh wait, you know, when you do pinch to zoom on the 830, it goes more than. So it does. It goes beyond what the pure view gives you, right? so it starts pixelating, right?
Oh,
Because they have to give you something.
right, because it'll
Otherwise,
just
think about it, with
stop it.
10 megapixels, you get like 1.1 times zoom, you know, on the
Right.
pure view, you know.
Yeah, it wouldn't be good looking at all.
So
Yeah.
the lossy zoom ends at like 1.1 or 1.2 times, and so they let you do 2 or 3 times zoom, but you can clearly see the pixels at that point, which is the compromise. But honestly, I tell you what, the 830 blows my mind in terms of imaging quality. You'd think that less pixels compared to the 20 on the 930 and the 40 on the 41 on the 1020 would be a big disaster. But oh my God, it's not. If you're willing to give up on the zoom, the OIS, the quality of the optics on the 830 are on, like, nothing can touch this on the Android world. Like,
That's really good
you're
to
in a
hear,
whole
actually.
different league.
Yeah,
You know?
I'm pleased to hear that.
Take it for a spin. Seriously, like, since you have a
I would like to.
1020, just back up your 1020, restore the 830, and enjoy, because you'll love it. It's really that good.
If I ever get it back from Jaime Rivera, that's exactly what I'm going to do. He's in Honduras, so I don't know how likely that's going to be.
Oh boy.
Someone in
Well,
the
you
Q&A
could
shared
probably
the link to this
ping
thing, by the way.
just ping Microsoft devices, get them to send you a second one. They'll probably have a whole bunch floating around.
That would be nice. I would like that. Did you
And
check out
it
the
does.
link to the 1030? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, look at that. I'm seeing the link now to that crazy
Yeah,
crazy.
the
It's amazing.
photos are nuts on this 1030. Like, you can see the stenciled up prototype markings. You can even see the IMEI, which is crazy.
Wow.
But it's like property of Microsoft Mobile, and it's not for sale, engineering sample, etc.
Well, that's weird. What I was gonna say is that the what I'd like to see is a follow up. I want to see a 1030, and like I think it would be great.
Yeah. And like the
Wow,
fact that it's
look
aluminum,
at this
it's
thing.
not totally jacketed in polycarbonate. It's got aluminum accents. I mean, that's exactly what I think it needs to push it to the sort of premium feel
Oh, this is
area.
really interesting. How did I miss this when it was in?
I know.
Wow. This is real,
Stoked.
dude. This is so real.
Sort of want to bid on it, but I'm not gonna.
Oh, how much is that gonna be?
I don't know. It's gonna go for a lot of money, I bet. If it doesn't get shut down, pretty quick.
What is 1,588 yen? How long did that come out?
I don't know. I can ask the Googs about that.
Oh, notice though, dual LED instead of xenon, huh?
It's a dual LED instead of xenon. That's
1,588 Japanese yen equals 13 United States dollars and 37 cents.
Well, there you go. Let's buy it.
Yeah, that's a bargain. We should definitely.
Snap it up. I should have. I should have
So
my 1020
anyway,
with me and show it.
quickly wanted to cover something with you since we're talking Microsoft devices, Nokia. You saw Nokia's tablet. What's your take on that, real quick? This is the new Nokia.
Yes.
It seems very much a copycat experience, which is very disappointing to me.
Exactly what I said. I completely agree. And it's Foxconn who's not just building it, but they're also running the sales experience. They're running the customer service experience. So in every way conceivable, this is a Foxconn tablet with a Nokia badge on it. Now, Nokia did do the design, so we can't take that away from them. But even the design, as you say, is a copycat. Sort of, more than sort of, totally it is. I would just rather get an iPad mini. Now, the software is rather exciting to me.
Yeah, I like the Z launcher, actually.
But I don't like that I don't like the gimmick of like drawing a letter to go to whatever app you want. I think that's kind of dumb. But I like that it's clean and it plays nicely with the clean chassis. I think that's cool. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm excited to see Nokia making devices again as the new Nokia, because it means that when they're going to be coming out with phones in 18 months or whatever the time limitation is, we're going to see some Android phones with a Nokia brand and hopefully some good optics and good imaging chops. I can only assume, unless they're completely farmed out to Foxconn, in which case they're just going to be very generic and then it's going to be boring as hell.
Right. Yeah. What about that, though? I mean, doesn't Microsoft have? Didn't all that the optical property? Didn't all that go to Microsoft under the Microsoft Mobile brand when that acquisition closed?
I think so, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, in the Q&A here, yes, there's Yola as well, who just crowdfunding their own tablet.
Right.
And I have to say I have a soft spot for Yola. I love these guys. They're a fantastic team. I told them they should hire me. I don't know if they will, but
I hope they do. That would be awesome.
Love to work for these. I'd like to do what I did at Pebble for Yola. It'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think I'm really excited about their tablet, because even though I actually think it was a little tricky to use like phones are so personal. They're such productivity monsters, right? That for me, I hacked my Yola phone to run Android Google Play services. Uh,
Oh.
so I was able to
yeah.
run all the Google apps that I needed, but it was a hack. I had to every time there was an update, I had to redo that,
Get the
right?
key again and do all that.
And
Yeah.
some people are going to argue that I'm missing the point, that this whole idea is this is an open source phone. Why would I do that? Well, I'm sorry. That's my workflow. That's what I need.
Right.
So for me, in that sense, the Yola phone they kind of missed the mark. But a Yola tablet, however, for me, a device that's primarily an email client, a web browser, and a social media client, I can totally do that. I don't necessarily need all the Google services for that. I can use Facebook and Twitter as APKs, and I can use the built-in mail client with IMAP, sorry, and I can use a good web browser to get most of my productivity work done. So that's got me much more excited all of a sudden.
It's refreshing to hear that, because my position on it was like, as I'm like you, I like seeing new stuff from Yola, sort of whatever it is, and I really like the Sailfish software a lot. But I feel like
great.
now isn't the time to be getting into tablets, because tablets are sort of like becoming like they're running the last leg of the cycle of becoming the new netbook, right? Like where it's like they exploded and they were kind of cool, and now they're just the bottom sort of falling out. And,
but that's the thing, though. It's hard to differentiate on hardware because hardware is being commoditized so much, right? But on software, however, they are able, I think, to do something probably slightly unique. And I'm not talking about software in terms of app ecosystem, because I hate to say this, but I have a really hard time seeing how Sailfish could develop a great following in terms of its own app ecosystem. But it does have Android as an app ecosystem, right? And so imagine a very awesome custom skin on top of Android, and in a way that's kind of what Sailfish gives you, even though it's its own OS, which it's in a way even better that way because it's all open source. So imagine you own a really awesome custom OS that hopefully takes really great advantage of the tablet form factor and that can have APKs installed on top of. I think that's pretty awesome, but I do believe that it would be even more awesome if Yola gave us a simple install that would let us use Google Play Services apps.
I think that would be terrific, but I don't know if doesn't go against the agreement that like Google enforces with Android distros.
I don't know. Maybe it's something that Yola and Google and other players that are kind of doing similar things, like who comes to mind? BlackBerry.
Yeah.
Should revisit. Maybe they need to lobby Google. Maybe they need to all get in a room and say, look, we want to run our own OS, but we really love your apps ecosystem, and we want to embrace the Google services. For you, it's more advertising revenue.
Right.
You're not making money off of Android, so
right, exactly.
Just let's make it happen.
What I find most interesting about Yola is their ability to whip up their audience, their ability to instill loyalty in a user base, and leverage that to like spread the word. Because every time I run a Yola story, every time even someone mentions me and Yola in the same tweet, there's like Yola Antarctica just retweeted this. Like Yola.
But you know why? It's because they are these are the people who gave a lot of the people on the Yola team are the people who gave us the Nokia N9.
Right. No,
Amigo,
totally.
I mean, Amigo was awesome. I reviewed the N9 for Engadget, and I was smitten. I still have the white unicorn, I call it, the 64 gigabyte white N9. I still have one, and I'm never going to give it up. It's awesome. I don't use it, obviously, but I'm keeping it forever.
Yeah, so they have
so
this
I can hold it in my sleep.
So you can put it under your pillow. Well, it's okay.
That's right.
That's what I do with the original Palm Pre, so it's fine.
Oh, there you go.
We can air our admissions here. But yeah, no, they have a really, really great ability to connect with their audience, and I think that's huge, and that's a rarity. And the fact that they've managed to do that and grow, and like, what did they get? 7 times, 8 times what they asked for in Indiegogo in the first day for that tablet? That's awesome. I look forward to seeing that.
And don't forget the fact that you can buy a phone out there that's completely open source today.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just for a second take our politics and our brand loyalties and our OS loyalties and app ecosystem loyalties aside, just because practically speaking for me it makes more sense to be on Android services. But if I take that aside, if for some reason I wanted to use a phone today that didn't have any allegiances to anything, I could do that with a Sailfish phone, with a Yola phone. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that's pretty awesome, as you say, in 2014, almost 2015, to have that exist. I agree.
So listen, we're kind of out of time, but I wanted to quickly, to wrap this up, quickly go over what are your top phones today. Like, if you had to make recommendations, and this is not about price, this is not about what would be your phone picks today? Pick your 5.
The iPhone 6 has to be in there because I think it's a really well-rounded device, and I think it's a really beautiful device in some respects. And so, I mean, that's in there, and that's no surprise to anybody. The Moto X is also in there at 100% because even though it's got a really pretty poor battery life and a mediocre at best camera, it's got features that no other Android phone has, and they sound gimmicky at first, but they're really, really useful as well. Continuing with the Android thing, the Note 4 has got to be in there for the people who absolutely need the best of the best. And I'm different from you. I use that S Pen a little bit, and I miss it when I don't have it. And so,
you know who uses it too? Tim Stevens.
Does he? He uses the S Pen all the time?
Yeah, he cannot. He's a Note guy now because he started with a Note 2 and he just never went back. You got the 3 and you got the 4.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh well, I'm in good company then.
Yes.
I wanted to, the 930 sounds like the unimaginative thing to suggest in the Windows Phone space, just because it's like it's the high-end Windows Phone that's not the 1520, which is this massive tile of this sheet of plastic. But I have to recommend it because I think the Icon or the 930, whichever way you go, it's a great device. It's got a great camera, and the 1020. It's as great as the camera is. I think it's just too old to recommend.
It's obsolete now. Yeah.
Right. And there's a weird one that I want to like. I know there's something pinging me that's saying like there's a weird suggestion I want to give, and I want it to be the BlackBerry Classic, but I can't do it in good conscience because I haven't used it yet, and I've been banging down their door to try and get a review device, and I don't have one yet. But I always say that we shouldn't confine our recommendations to the top platforms. Go try something different. And BlackBerry 10. I don't know this about the BlackBerry Classic, but BlackBerry 10, the software experience, is really, really cool. If you can live with a little hacking.
It is cool. I agree. I still have a Z10 and a Q10 somewhere.
Oh, the Q10 is so cool. Sorry.
My picks would be iPhone 6 or 6 Plus interchangeably here. Nexus 6, Nexus 5 interchangeably. And then I would go to the G3. LG G3, definitely one of my top contender of the year. I just love the size of the screen, the small bezel, the fact that it's not too cluttered in terms of UI, and you can install the Android launcher, and then the camera is just kick-ass. And that display, oh my god, that display. And then the Note 4, I agree with you. I think that because it's got OIS, and it's a big phone that's not too big, and it's got all this great stuff, and the S Pen for those who like it. You can't go wrong, and now it's metal. Now it's finally metal. It's finally done right.
Feels right.
So let's see. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is going to be the 930, right? 930 or Icon. And if you really can't stretch your budget there, go for the 830. It's so close. I mean, and then finally, this is if I can add more to that, like a second tier level, the Moto X. The Moto X or Moto G, depending on your budget, the new Moto G, the OnePlus One, and trying to think.
Lumias? Did you hit it? You hit the 930. So.
I did the Icon 930, yeah. And potentially the Galaxy Alpha if you want a nice, small, beautiful Android phone. And then if you really want something crazy. Somebody asked the OnePlus. I gave that as a second tier primarily because I think it's a little big for its screen size, and I think that its camera leaves a lot to be desired. But and for me, those are important things. But the last one I would suggest is kind of we just talked about it, and that's the Yola phone. Just if you really want to be different, I mean, it's a solid phone. You can't go wrong with it. The software has improved dramatically over the last year. And it's really a piece of hardware that people are going to ask you questions about because that back is removable. They have you can have backs that have hardware built in, right? Because the backs, this is the other half. It's called has all this hardware that you can put in it. So because there's a USB interface in there, So that's kind of cool. There's been people who've made like e-ink backs and all kinds of really cool things.
I gotta check up
Secondary
on those.
displays on the back of the phone,
Yeah.
and like you can write. It's open source, so you can connect an Arduino to this thing, and all of a sudden add something like you want to put a printer in the back of your phone. No
Do
problem. You want to put some glowing notification LEDs that have like a Burning Man pattern that flash and go crazy. You can do that. Yeah.
I would totally do that.
So it's
I
not
would do a lot
just
of
open
tricolor
source
LEDs.
software; it's open source hardware too, right? Remember that.
Yeah. This
Anyway,
time next year,
listen.
we'd be talking about Project Ara in the same breath.
Oh man, I got to play with it to expand. They had it there, and I touched it, and I used it, and I took a bunch of pictures, and I sent them off to Phil at Android Central. He was very happy.
I bet.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're living an exciting time, and I think there's going to be some really great stuff. Hopefully, CS will be fun. I'm looking forward to a few more phones I haven't played with yet, like the Nexus 6, obviously. Well, play more with, and the Z3 Compact, and the Edge, the Note Edge.
No, the Note Edge. Yeah, we're still waiting on that one ourselves.
It's kind of a crazy one, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, we should wrap this up. Thanks for coming on my podcast, Michael. It's been really a pleasure. Do you want to go ahead and pimp yourself and your blog and all the other things you want to pimp?
Sure. Absolutely, yeah. No, the pleasure's been mine. And if you've not heard my podcast before, it's the Pocket Now Weekly podcast. You can find it at pocketnow.com. It's really inelegant URL, pocketnow.com/tag/pocketnowweekly, all one word. And on Twitter, I tweet probably too often at Captain2Phones. It's Captain the number 2 phones. And of course, if you just want to read our site, it's pocketnow.com. So, thanks.
And a great handle it is. So you'll find me on Twitter at tnkgrl, tnkgrl, and on my blog tnkgrl.com, also tnkgrl.com. Check out my YouTube channel, which you can get to from my blog, for the upcoming reviews of all these phones we discussed today. I'll try to podcast again this month of December. Hopefully, I can find a bit of time, and there'll be a few more things we can chat about. Thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for the audio version. I have to edit it and put it up, but it'll be there pretty soon. And again, Michael, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. Yeah.
It was a great time. So I look forward to doing it again, and we'll have to get you on the Pocket Now Weekly again as well.
I'd love to do that. Absolutely. All right. Bye, everybody.
See ya.